Welcome to the Animal-Based Dad podcast, the show where metabolic health meets mental health. Through expert interviews and topic deep dives, we unpack why looking after the body is central to looking after the mind. So sit back and enjoy. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the new and improved Animal-Based Dad podcast. I'm your host, Ricky Duplessis. We have a fantastic returning guest today, Dr. Christopher Brandlin, and we are taking this very first episode following my relaunch, looking at the link between metabolic health and mental health and exploring what you can do to use your metabolic health to improve your mental health and well-being. Dr. Brandlin, welcome back to the show, sir.
It's always a pleasure, Ricky, and you can always call me Chris.
Chris, you've been with us twice before. This is your third trip back to the Animal-Based Dad podcast.
It was the first time was right when we met on LinkedIn, like 2 or 3 years ago.
So it's beginning of 2025. Yeah, you were episode number 2. And then, my second guest.
Yeah, and then the second one is right after I got banned from LinkedIn last year. So I'm not sure. I still try to get on, even when I try to create a new email or use a new email create account, it gets banned immediately. So it's a permanent ban. But now I'm feeling even more confident since I am the official Republican nominee for the state of Nevada. I'm actually probably the only candidate that's really pushing on health. And I wish others did the same, but I think it's a huge wake-up call, and that's why I'm probably more excited.
Right, that's awesome. Well, first of all, congratulations on the Republican nomination. I know that's been a long time in the works. And actually, thinking back, I'll just take the viewers through our history quickly. So when Christopher was first on the podcast in early 2025, he had just announced that he was at that point in time looking to run for Congress. And when you came back around the second time, you had made a strategic change. You hadn't announced it then. You hinted at it in the podcast, but didn't quite announce it. The announcement came later. I remember us talking off air, and you told me how you had, through conversations with other people who you respect, come to understand that to make the difference that you want to make in public health, the state level is probably a more effective tool than the federal level. And so you decided, instead of running for Congress, you were going to run locally in your state.
Yeah, I'll call it a state Congress versus a federal Congress is another way to put it too.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you've just been through the candidate nomination for the Republican Party, and you've won that for your district in Nevada. So congratulations. So talk us through what that looks like going forward. What are you trying to achieve? What are your goals with this? Where's this taking?
Yeah. And so you probably are maybe learning to know politics more than the average American. So I appreciate that. You're very well versed, Ricky. So I'm the official, since I had to win the primary, I had to be the chosen Republican. I had to win the primary, and I did by a very large margin. And it was very surprising since I've never ran for political office. Everybody that's running right now, even if they've never held an office, they've ran multiple times before. The person that I'm was running against, she ran 3 different times. So she's got the name identity. That's what you go for in politics, name identity. Do they know of you? And everyone's like, who the hell is this guy? He's like some crazy health nut. And they're like, oh, he's an attorney. Oh, he's a research doctor. He's a little bit more than the typical health nut.
Yeah.
And they're like, why the hell is an attorney? So I'm kind of glad I'm getting a little bit more respect on that level too. So that's why I'm very passionate moving forward. And right after winning the primary, I've had a lot of different calls with people basically giving me better opportunities and to do more for public health. That is going to be our big wake-up call. And, I think if you recall what we were talking about last year, when I was I was originally running for the federal congressional level, but I wanted to switch to state because that's how you can truly change public health, because you can't change it at a national level on a congressional level. It has to be done state by state. And people need to understand this, because although Bobby Kennedy, RFK Jr., is very well respected around the world, everybody's watching him, and I love the guy too. But HHS, Health and Human Services, what he does is he sets the guidelines to people to follow, but it's up to each individual state on whether they want to follow that.
Hmm.
That is why only it was 7 states, but it just became eighth. I think it was Mississippi, another state. Only 8 states of the entire United States, which is less than a fifth, so less than 20% have banned lab-grown meat. And
Mm.
Italy, like stuff like banned lab-grown meat as a whole nation. So
Mm.
in America, only 20% has banned lab-grown meat, and lab-grown meat is just fake, full of carcinogenic crap. And this
Yeah,
is something that we should not be given to the kids, and that's a huge concern. So I want Nevada to be the ninth state, and that's I'm going to push that. But I'm going to put a lot of
nice.
other things too. Is this, you know, they're trying a lot of states, Ricky. It's a huge concern, is we have a lot of malnourished children. And there's a lot of states, I'll call them blue states. They're pushing for meatless Mondays and meatless Fridays. They're trying to take meat off the menu.
Yeah.
Something in the something we've been eating for 2.5 million years for survival. They don't want your kids eating it because there's all this false propaganda about how cows are causing climate change and like killing the environment and even though they're trying to talk about like animal activism, I'm like, but you're also talking about like ending the species of cows. So you guys are
Mm.
not making any sense. They don't know about regenerative farming, which is a really interesting topic that actually improves the environment. So cows are on this, you know, on our soil for a reason. They actually do provide like some benefits to this environment. I'm going to do a lot more studies with the Water Coalition on that too, but I really want to bring a wake-up call to the rest of Nevada on how we can get back to public health because 50 to 60 years ago, we were actually in a much better health.
Yeah.
But ever since a lot of fake preservative food, artificial ingredients,
Hmm.
a lot of this lab grown or plant-based crap meat that they're trying to push on the public, and the excessive um, the distribution of pharmaceutical medications, and I'll call it the manipulation on the American public about how they need pharmaceuticals to live. That is some of the main factors that is making our health on a decline. And Dr.
Mm.
Ken Berry put it the best in his documentary. He said, they call it the agricultural revolution. It's actually the agricultural de-evolution. We're
Mm.
declining in time, and we need to go back to the better grassroots on how to really make it. So I'm really hoping you're pushing for the same thing over on the other side of the
Yeah,
world.
yeah, absolutely. We have similar struggles here. So you mentioned the sort of Meatless Monday initiative at schools. We don't have
Yeah.
Meatless Monday per se, but the vegan propaganda is pushed hard, in the schools.
Mhm.
I have conversations with my daughter all the time, and thankfully she's come around to my way of thinking. She's still a bit of a fussy eater, so she doesn't eat as much meat as I would like. Um, but she now her phrase is, "The teachers don't know anything." And I'm like, no, 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 you need to understand the teachers are just pushing the education set curriculum. That this is all part of the curriculum that they're given, and this is what they have to teach. This isn't your teacher sitting at home thinking up how they're going to brainwash you. That's not how it works. The people who are thinking up the brainwashing are further up the food chain. So we do
Yeah.
have very similar struggles. And it's interesting you mentioned there about the climate activism and everything like that. And we have a bit of like an unholy trinity going on at the moment because you've got climate activism, you've got animal activism, and then you've got the ideological based vegan movement, which have all amalgamated into this like single entity now that is pushing the whole plant-based
Exactly.
agenda. It's quite wild the time that we live in. But
It
thankfully,
is. It's tied together with a lot of just negative consequences to our
mm,
society when you think about it.
yeah, thankfully, at least within the circles that I run in, I imagine it's similar to yourself as well. The pendulum seems to be swinging hard in the opposite direction now. We were seeing the sort of keto movement, the carnivore movement, the metabolic health and well-being movement will really start to make strides, and it's been quite brilliant to watch. I mean, I started my journey in early 2018, And the at least what it felt like online, the size of the community was so much smaller than what it is now. It's grown
It is. Yeah.
exponentially, which is awesome.
The keto community has grown substantially, but even just the carnivore community, which is a smaller community within the ketogenic community, when I was speaking with Philip Meese at Hack Your Health last year. I'm not sure if you know Philip. Have you ever heard of the carnivore bar? It's kind of
Yep.
like it's very common. It's actually getting a little bit more popular, but it is like the purest meat bar that you can find. It's dehydrated, kind of cooked ground beef mixed in with tallow, and it's perfectly sealed and it's fresh,
Mm.
and it's like probably the best, like, pure carnivore bar that you could eat, just pure mutant fat, but it's dehydrated, so it's actually stays naturally preserved
Mm.
rather than adding excess ingredients to preserve it. But we talked at Tampa last year, and we're talking about, how many carnivores are there right now, like around the world. He's like, well, in the
Mm.
United States, around the world, because he's got the better idea, because he's been distributing his carnivore bars for, like, thousands of people, right, over the past
Mm.
couple of years. And he's like, you know what? It used to be just like 10 to 15,000 people, but now there's probably like almost a million carnivores around
Yeah,
the world. And he's
easy.
like, and it's growing. Yeah, it's substantially. And the reason why is, even though mainstream media will never promote carnivore, because in fact, if you
Mm.
ever see like a news story on the, like, about a all meat, it's all based all meat diet, a carnivore diet, it's always saying something negative about, like,
Yeah.
they're laughing and they're mocking it. But then you see all these movies, documentaries, and testimonials of thousands, if not millions, of people who spoke out and said, I was on medications, and like, for all my life, I was getting worse. I was kind of a routine kind of customer back to the, like, hospital. I wasn't a patient, I was just a customer. And all the doctors, they just kept putting me on medications. Not one of the doctors told me to basically, revisit my diet. Not one doctor gave me any dietary recommendation. In fact, the few that gave me dietary recommendations, they said to eat less meat. I got
Mm.
worse. But then when I started to eat more meat and only meat, all my problems went away. And,
Mm.
and, and now you're seeing so many people speak out. And it's kind of unfortunate that, Dr. Kiltz,
Mhm.
with the carnivore community. So I've done a lot of different shared podcasts with him, and we've done dual events where we co-host events.
Yeah.
And his team and a lot of his health coaches, they're getting a lot of their content censored on YouTube. And they're not talking about the typical, like, YouTube was really big on, like, censoring, like, anti-vaccine
Mhm.
comments. But when you're just thinking of just general health, like, hey, I've been eating like a primarily meat-based diet, and I put all my conditions in remission. This is just my personal and honest testimonial. A lot of their health coaches have been getting their channels shut down,
Mm.
and it's kind of very unfortunate that that a lot of these I'll say these platforms, okay, you have Google, you have
Mhm.
YouTube, they're all run indirectly by these people that actually have the ties with these big corporations and big pharmaceutical companies, that they know when a threat comes their way for people to get healthier naturally,
Yeah.
they actually try to censor this. And that, I told everybody, I think you probably saw my clips on Google. Like, Google is like the biggest propaganda you can find. When you try to search things, it hides it.
Mm.
And I try to explain to people that I did a small, like, talking head reel about a couple minutes, like, Google says meat is causes heart cancer. However, Google always also says men can get pregnant. So do you want to really compare analogies? Google thinks men can get pregnant, but Google also tells you that meat's going to cause cancer, and it's false for so many reasons. I kind of explain why, but what I tell is that Google, and like the largest platform you can find around the world, right?
Mhm.
It's owned by an entity called Alphabet Incorporated, but the
Yeah.
CEO of Alphabet Incorporated is Sundar Pichai, who is actually tied in with the pharmaceutical companies, and he was this head spokesperson to promote the vaccines back in like 2020.
Mm.
So if people like look behind what's going on, they'll realize, man, this is all propaganda. They're not trying to persuade us, they're trying to manipulate us. And that is a
Yeah.
humongous difference that people need to recognize. And I think you're right. People are, the pendulum is swinging like the other direction, is that people are waking up and they're
Yeah.
realizing they've been lied to for many years. But we need more people to speak out
Hmm.
because I can't be doing all my own. I already got banned from LinkedIn. But I try to tell people that you know don't bash me for just running for a political office. I'm doing this for a good cause
Yeah.
because there's a lot of new carnivores that don't really know who I am. They don't know that I've been a carnivore for 8 years.
Mm.
They don't know that I was a very competitive athlete and fitness trainer before I became an attorney. And they don't know what happened to me in 2017 when I got my intestines cut open. They don't know all that. They're like,
Yeah.
oh, he's just a politician and attorney. He's
Agree.
just a salesman. Get him out of here. Like, we don't want any politics. Like, I try to wake people up, and I'm glad you're doing it on your side of the world over in the UK. But you know, the things that affect your everyday life, it happens at a political level. It
Mm.
happens with people in office, whether or not your children's getting proper food at schools, whether or not
Yeah.
you're getting proper kind of like healthcare treatment at local hospitals, and whether your doctor is even going to know 1 cent about nutrition. That always changes as at a political level, whether it's
Mm.
through through your provinces over in like in England, or whether it's going to happen in the legislature or the federal House of Representatives over here in the United States. It always happens at a political level.
Yeah.
So if you don't have anybody speaking up at a higher level to get those voices heard at higher levels, you're always going to have problems.
Yeah. I had an interesting conversation with a mutual friend of ours, Neil Friedman, some time back. Neil's busy with his PhD at the University of Northampton here in the
Yeah,
UK.
I remember you introduced me to him 2 years
Yeah.
ago, and I think
Yeah, he's a good
on
guy.
LinkedIn before I got kicked off. Yeah.
Yeah, and we were talking about what he aims to do with his research, like what comes off the back of that. So he's looking at bioenergetics. He's looking at how you can, and I'm probably doing his PhD a bit of an injustice here, but in a nutshell, as I understand it as a layman, he's looking at mitochondria, and he's looking at what chronic glucose exposure does to mitochondria, not just
Yeah.
initially, but want to say fraternally, as in the future generations, the actual DNA of that mitochondria is altered as well. The gene expression of the mitochondria is altered. So by chronically exposing the group A to glucose, he's then having a look at what their offspring and their offspring's offspring look like, and what's happened to them, which is different to the control group. And he shows that chronic glucose exposure carries. So we inherit our mitochondria from our mother. I think that's the way that it works. And so if your mother is chronically consuming carbohydrate and is struggling with high blood sugar and glucose problems, et cetera, the mitochondria that's passed on to you and in turn to your kids are genetically changed unless you're doing something to switch back the expression of those genes. So that's a very high level, and it's probably not done Neil's research much justice. But the point that we were getting to, and what he's hoping to do with this research, is to take it into the political arena, because, and he made a very good point, and you've made the same point now, and I just want to reiterate because I think it brings it together nicely. Like, the best way to influence public health is in legislation. It's the quickest
Yeah.
way to get the needle moving. And that like it took me a while to sit and think with that, but yeah, it's the quickest way to get the needle moving. The example Neil gave was take all the soda companies. Now, they would be reluctant in and of themselves. Coca-Cola, for instance, will not want to make a change which is healthier for the public, and there's public demand for it. But they won't do it unless legislates to do it because they don't want to give up ground. They don't want to give up market share to Pepsi. And what legislation does is it evens that playing field and forces them all to do it at the same time. And that's the only way you get these corporations to make the same changes at the same time. They won't do it on their own because they're too scared of giving up market share. And so
Correct.
legislation is a blunt instrument, but it is the best way to influence public health en masse. So it's awesome what you're doing.
To Neil, yeah, because I remember when you introduced me, I contributed my thoughts to Neil like 2 years ago when he was putting some thoughts together during for his program. But once he actually has like a published kind of like clinical trial or literature review, what he would do is that he would propose that, basically send it over to his local assemblyman or a legislator to bring it up at a legislative hearing. And that is actually how you can get your attention, but you have to bring it up to the legislator. The problem is a lot of the legislators, or congressmen, whatever you want to refer to them as, they ignore a lot of things that comes from the public,
Mm.
unless it's like a huge crisis that everybody's speaking out that it's so hard to ignore.
Yeah.
So you have to find it to basically pull the person aside, like, hey, I have a serious issue that must be addressed, and I really want you to bring this up at the next legislative hearing. I'm going to present you with evidence, and here's my clinical trials. Basically, this is established. This is all quality based, and it's going to show that it's going to make a substantial effect on passing on the mitochondria kind of effects over to your offspring. So this should be kind of highly considered to wake up,
Mm-hmm.
the mothers on their diets, that it's going to
Yeah.
affect their children. And I told that to my mother too, because she had like shit. I was like, hey, you screwed me up. Um, but yeah, no, that's actually how it has to be passed. But the problem is, I'm not sure if I told you or you saw from my previous reels, is that I'm sure it's problematic in the UK as well, but in the United States, the pharmaceutical industry, is one of the most powerful industries in the world, right?
Yeah. The lobbying is a problem.
Yeah, exactly. They fund over two-thirds of all politicians, state and federal.
Mm-hmm.
And people like, well, I looked at all of his donations. It didn't come. I was like, no, but this person gets his donation from an organization called a Political Action Committee, a PAC, and that PAC generates most of its income from a pharmaceutical company. And that's
Mm.
kind of like indirectly funneling the money to
Yeah.
get the control influence at the legislative floor.
Yeah.
And that is actually why and how these pharmaceutical companies have been having so much power and influence in making all of the same thing with media too. I mean, you see the censorship, but also have you seen like anybody can see these advertisements from these pharmaceutical companies that they give everybody smiling and it looks so
Mm-hmm.
colorful, like, oh, he's so
Yeah.
much better after taking this medication. And then when they talk about the side effects, they'll speak 400 words per minute to get out all the side effects really, really
Yep.
quick and within 5 seconds.
Yep.
They'll like, oh, impotence, heart failure, all this. I'm like, well, impotence. You're saying that I'm going to take something for my skin and I'm not going to be able to get my dick up after this. You know what? You should slow that down. That's a major side
Yeah.
effect I should
Yeah.
probably know about before you speed things up. So,
Mm.
and I think that is, if you want to allow a pharmaceutical company to still operate as a business, because I do believe that every business should have their opportunity to state that, but they
Mm-hmm.
have to be fully transparent.
Yeah.
They can't manipulate. If you're going to say that we have a new drug on the market that you should consider, the FDA has approved it, you should list all the potential side effects very clearly in big font,
Yep.
and you should also state the fine details of how many people actually got permanently better from it. Because as you know, and I know, a lot of these medications, they never cure any
All they
problems.
do is treat symptoms.
Yeah, they
Hmm.
manage the problems. And that's
Yeah,
why I put some other reels. I'm like, we don't have a healthcare system. We have a sick care system.
yeah.
We wait until the person's really sick, and then we just kind of manage their problems for the rest of their lifetime
But
until trying
but
to
that
find a
makes
cure.
sense, to be fair, because repeat customers is where the money is. So if they were
Exactly.
genuinely root cause resolving everything, they would put themselves out of business. It's a very bad business model to
Exactly.
get into.
And that's why I'm telling people that people are like, oh, just take out big pharma. I'm like, you can't take them out because they have the most like lawsuits, but they have the most money. So they actually paid off billions, trillions of dollars in lawsuits over the past couple of decades. So suing them is not going to really do anything. The best and most natural approach is you get the people better naturally without any kind of using any pharmaceuticals, or you get them to wean off the pharmaceuticals while getting better and just focusing on their diet and lifestyle. And you know what? I always tell people, even though I'm the carnivore lawyer, I'm not expecting everybody to eat only meat. I would suggest at least a ketogenic approach where you cut down the carbohydrates, but I want people to eat real food
Yeah,
with just one
that's
ingredient. If
yeah. I think
everybody
so far
takes
as common
right,
ground goes, that's exactly nail on the
and
head.
that's going to
Just
be more realistic too, because
yeah,
you're not going to be expecting like, especially like what we have, if we're going to say like in some of these major cities, like 8 or 9 million people, I'm not expecting all of them to turn carnivores. We got probably a million carnivores around the entire world, where we have billions of
yeah,
people. But we want people to eat real food. If we can actually
yeah.
get people to start eating real food and just live a healthy lifestyle, be a little bit more active rather than staying indoors all day, then guess what? Big Pharma will eventually run out of business because
Yeah.
they're not going to have their repeat customers, because people are going to realize that I felt so much better when I stopped taking the medications and I just ate real food.
Mm.
That is actually the best and most realistic way on how we can probably get the pharmaceutical companies out of debt, because then they won't have the money to pay off these politicians.
Yeah. Yeah,
See?
no, fair point. Fair point. Um, and that actually leads us nicely on. You've spoken there about 8 years ago you went carnivore. And I know your backstory, and I don't want you to repeat the whole backstory. The audience can go listen to episode 2 of the Animal Based podcast to get your backstory. But with the new focus being the metabolic health and mental health link, you went through the ringer. Like you really went through a tough time. Talk to us a bit about how that impacted your mental health and when you got the help. And I think it was first in Hungary under Dr. Clemens,
Yeah,
where things started to turn
correct.
around for you. How did that change things from a mental health perspective for you? Just maybe a different take to how
Yeah.
you've spoken about this before, but
So,
one worth
and the
getting
good news
into.
is that yeah, so the good news is that since I told the story thousands of times, I got better at just condensing it down. Long story short, former competitive athlete, I became an attorney, and then when I was practicing law, I got sick, and I did the wrong step by just going to conventional doctors who didn't want to treat the root cause. They just fed me a bunch of pharmaceuticals, which basically was wrecking me for over a year. I ended up having to get a piece of my intestine removed, had my intestines cut open, but there was multiple kind of failures, and they had to recut me open multiple times. And the only way I healed was with doing two things. I did a 10-day water fast, and second, I refed on only meat. And that was
Mm,
going into 2018. And that is when I learned about the carnivore diet, because I learned when I was trying to refeed on other foods and introduce, I'm like, I started healing the gut. And then whenever I just introduce a little bit of vegetables, or I could never do any kind of nuts and seeds. It was what it kind of woke me up that I can only eat meat. And then when I investigated the carnivore diet, I found that there's a lot of other people in my situation, whether they
mm,
had ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease. A lot of them heal their intestines naturally by just sticking with meat. And that's why some people, if you're really inflamed, you got to go all carnivore. So that's why I went to Budapest, Hungary. But before I was healing, when I was struggling, Rick, you can imagine, especially with me, like being like a competitive athlete all your life and being like a former all natural bodybuilding champion, and all of a sudden being stuck to like a bed or a hospital bed, like for like
mm,
almost a year and just getting completely sick. everything just got, so traumatic that my mental health took a huge toll. And actually, I didn't tell a lot of people this, but actually I told it to a few people is that, I got so bad when I thought I tried to end my own life. And I got put
Mm,
on a 5150 hold, which is kind of a psychiatric hold for 72 hours, basically because they thought I was a danger to myself. But it was true.
mm,
I was so bad, and I was addicted. I was addicted to pain medications too, because after the surgeries I was in so much pain.
mm,
And antidepressants, which is another thing. So I always try to
mm.
tell people that whether it's pain medications and antidepressants, they actually are not going to help you. They're going to make you worse. And I actually personally lost a lot of friends over antidepressants over the years. There was
Yeah.
major, and what? There's a lot of literature. I would invite Neil to look at this too. If you really look at the literature of the antidepressants, there is more correlation with suicide attempts after taking the antidepressants, because what
Mm,
it does, it creates such an instability where you'll be really happy, and like if you're taking like Lexapro, a couple other things, and then all of a sudden, like once you get off it, you'll be like really sad again, and you get
mm,
reliant on it. So they start increasing it, but that major shift, it throws the imbalance mentally so bad where people get really depressed. But so that's why I tell people it's not just the diet, that it's these medications that can cause some major
mm.
disturbances with you mentally, and like your whole nervous system will be out of whack, and you need that natural stability. And that is why you see a lot of these carnivores, including you and I and many others, that they got off a lot of their antidepressant medication, and their mental issues, like they're happier now.
Mm.
It's
Yeah,
kind of like they found
absolutely.
like they came back and they're like, no, like I was depressed for years, but sometimes they weren't even taking medications, but they were just depressed because they're in just such bad health. But when your body feels great, your mind's going to feel great. And
Yeah,
that's why it's kind of the biggest wake up call for mental health. And right now, the suicide rates, look at, as you probably can see all my reels and all my posts,
yeah,
I'm placing a large focus on the younger generation.
yeah,
And I'm glad that you're doing the same, because I know that you're working with your son well, and that's why you do address kind of like everything on a mental level too, and learning capacities too. Developmental
mm,
disabilities is a major issue, but the biggest problem we're having in the United States, I'm sure you guys are having in the UK, is that the suicide rates
young
the
man.
children
Yeah,
has skyrocketed over the
yeah.
years, and no one is saying anything, and they're treating it in the wrong manner. They're just giving the kids more antidepressants. So this is where we have to address the root cause.
Well, yeah,
What
I
is
was
their
going
diet
to say
and
it's
lifestyle?
the same situation. We've just spoken through the whole pharmaceutical sort of dichotomy where they manage symptoms because that's where they make money. And we were talking about it from a metabolic health perspective. So the listener's mind is probably going to things like diabetes, heart disease, statins, so on and so forth. Um, the same is true on the mental health side. It's just not as widely spoken about because the same situation occurs. People assume that their health is fine until it's not. People assume their mental health is fine until it's not. And then once mental illness is set in, you go off to your doctor, you get a referral, you get put on an antidepressant, an antipsychotic, whatever it may be. It's treating and managing the symptom. It's not resolving the root cause of whatever has caused your mental pain, your mental anguish, the onset of that condition. And so you end up in this vicious loop where you're dependent on a medication to help you cope. But because you're dependent on the medication, you start to become a little bit resistant to it, a little bit used to it, and they have to keep upping the dose. And it's a horrible cycle to be caught in. So it's good for people to connect those two. The pharmaceutical industry's primary function is symptom management. And if you
Yes.
understand that, you understand the value in taking preventative steps to try and reduce your risk of developing illness, whether it be physical or mental. And if you are unfortunate enough to be struggling already, I just want to highlight that there are things that you can do to improve the management of whatever condition you have, and in many cases, reverse it. And we see that now. For instance, in 2018, when I first started looking into ketogenic diets because I was going through my own health struggles, at that point in time, it was practically unheard of that you could reverse type 2 diabetes. It just wasn't spoken about, wasn't known. Now, where we sit in 2026, it's well established. Like, yeah, you can. You can put type 2 diabetes into full remission. And as long as you remain eating a low carbohydrate dietary approach, your diabetes will stay in remission and you don't need medication with it.
Exactly. And I actually had the same discussion with Dr. Ken Berry last June. So we had a podcast and he's like, hey, if you get on the legislative floor, they're going to probably dismiss you and not really pay attention because you'll be a freshman, you'll be a freshman congressman. He's like, you just speak out because if you speak out, eventually the news reporters are going to be standing right outside the legislative hall and they're going to put the microphones and they're going to get your chance on
Mm,
camera. And if you say, and he's like, and if you say that, hey, you can reverse type 2 diabetes with diet. If you just say that out loud, like with all the cameras to listen, you know what? Some people may dismiss it, but I guarantee you there's going to be some people watching on TV that are struggling with type 2 diabetes, and they may actually pay attention and say, you know what? I'm going to try this out. I'm going to go
mm,
on a very low or strict, carbohydrate diet. And I'm gonna try this out. And the moment they start seeing the change and put the they put the type 2 diabetes in remission, it does right there. You just started a chain of effect that she's going to tell all her friends, and this is how we can promote the word.
yeah.
And once you make that major change in someone's life, this is how you can branch it. And this is why we need more people to do these testimonials and kind of state their stories and let everybody know because unfortunately, when you try to do it through media and you try to do it through different channels, it gets dismissed. But
Mm,
I'm trying to make sure that I'm going to be one of the few people, few legislators or few political figures that's going to actually pay attention to the public when it comes to health. And I made it very clear. And the reason why I helped to self-fund a lot of my campaign, Ricky, I turned down some organizations because they're heavily funded by pharmaceutical companies. I made it very
yeah.
clear. I refuse to take any money from pharmaceutical companies. So indirectly, if I'm taking money from an organization that is receiving money from pharmaceutical companies such as Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson Johnson, I
Yeah.
don't want anything to do with you. So I'd rather work my ass off, still run a practice as a fucking part of my French, but as an attorney and pay my dues so I can win this election. And
Nice.
and I'm glad right now that we have more people, more of the voters. They're not always going to pay attention to who has the biggest money coming to politics. Right now, the grassroots approach is winning. And that's
Yeah.
why I personally walked out in like triple digit weather 5 to 6 hours a day here in Las Vegas because Las Vegas is one of the hottest kind of places in the United States. I didn't give a shit. I said, I'm going to walk outside. I'm going to spend 5 to 6 hours a day, a day with the
Mm,
community, and I'm going to get my name known. And that's working.
nice. Nice. Yeah, no, you've done exceptionally well there. Just coming back to the point I was making about type 2 diabetes going into remission, I used that analogy specifically because I want people to understand that the same is being seen with mental illness. And we've got Dr. Chris Palmer,
Yes.
we've got Dr. Georgia Eid, who are right at the forefront of what we call metabolic psychiatry. And they're using metabolic health interventions, predominantly dietary interventions, ketogenic interventions, and such, to treat serious mental illness in a clinical setting. And whilst it's an emerging field, the preliminary evidence is very, very encouraging. It is quite compelling, actually, because we're seeing serious mental conditions improve significantly. And in some cases, anecdotal as it may be, n equals one, because it's just here and there in the clinical setting, not randomized controlled trials, you see the reversal of conditions and people coming off long term antidepressant medication, antipsychotic medication, and do far better. And Dr. Palmer's theory is that mitochondrial health acts as a common pathway in disease onset and disease regression. In other words, anything that sort of degrades the health of the mitochondria in the cell will in turn allow the disease state to take effect. And I think that is true. And I'm just sort of connecting dots here. I'm not a doctor, but from our layman's perspective, if we can see a lifestyle intervention like a ketogenic diet reverse something like type 2 diabetes, which is a non-communicable disease, but we can also see it reverse major depression, for example. That central link, if Dr. Palmer is correct, suggests that your metabolic health, and I'll step it back from mitochondrial health because the general public perhaps won't know exactly what we mean there, rather than trying to educate everyone on the science of a cell.
Sure.
The better way for me is you think about it as metabolic health, which is just your health at the cellular level. If your health at the cellular level is the common pathway through which disease onset and reversal can happen, then surely by looking after your metabolic health in a preventative lifestyle prophylactic approach, you safeguard yourself against the onset of problems later on, a little bit like a pension, if you will.
Precisely, and that's why I changed, and that's why you also probably saw me change my slogan that I put in a lot of my video reels and a lot of my captions, is that I wanted to make it a safe message, because I can't say screw vaccines are going to kill you or pharmaceuticals are going to kill you. I'm going to be seen as a conspiracy theorist,
Yeah,
and especially with a
you got
couple
to
of other
play.
even
You got
people
to
from
play
my
it
own
carefully.
party. Yeah, so my new slogan, besides it, I still have "Make Nevada Healthy Again." I say prevention over prescription, or prevention before prescription, because I think if we can start with the prevention, it's going to make a huge change. So this will keep them from ever encountering any of the health issues. And I told you that even though what's happened to me is in the past, I want to make sure what happened to me will never happen to anybody else.
Yeah,
And that's why
absolutely.
yeah, and that's why I'm really hoping that we can have a good wake up call. But yeah, so I gotta ask. I actually have an autistic nephew,
Mm.
and I know you're kind of managing this well. I have, you know, my brother's really discouraging me from speaking with their pediatrician, because he knows that I'm a carnivore and he's the farthest. He's the opposite. You know what? You're always gonna have some family members that are complete
Yeah,
opposites of you,
yeah.
right? So he's a complete opposite. He's not. He's definitely not a Republican. He's not a meat eater. In fact, he's gonna like a. I still love him to heart, but he's a vegetarian liberal. But he likes that I'm trying to change public health, so he doesn't see me as the
Nice.
crazy like Republican. He's like, I'm glad, but my pediatrician kind of just told me that we're gonna listen to her, but she just wants our kid to just eat more because he was a little underweight, but his autism is horrible. It's
Mm.
getting very severe, and I'm really concerned for my nephews, because those are my beneficiaries, my trust. I don't have a wife and I don't have any children, so
Mm.
my goal is to provide to my nephews and nieces, and that's why I'm building my estate. And what happens to me, it's going to go to them. So I want them to be in good health, and my biggest concern is that the pediatrician told my brother, I don't care what he's eating,
Yeah,
just make sure he's eating lots.
I
And I'm like,
struggle with that.
the autism is be getting worse, and if he's just eating, and I see them, they're just snacking on sugar. I'm like, you're making it so much worse.
Yeah.
But I almost would just want to slap that pediatrician. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, you are going to ruin this kid's health. But unfortunately, I spoke with a lot of other parents, and they had the same issues with this
Mm.
with their pediatrician. We really got to wake up, and that's probably the most important doctor when you think about it. Okay,
Yeah.
raising the kids properly to make sure they're healthy is important. So, are
Yeah.
you having similar issues with pediatricians?
Yes, and before I get into that, I just want to like what you've said there is quite profound. So I fully agree that
Yeah.
pediatricians are probably the most important doctor in the entire health system because the overwhelming majority of my struggles, and probably the overwhelming majority of your struggles, were undoing bad habits formed during childhood,
Yeah,
nutritional bad
it was.
habits.
And I was.
Yeah,
I ate everything I wanted when I was a kid.
yeah. Like I have a horrible sweet tooth. And to this day, and I'm actually, it's a slight adjunct, but it's probably worthwhile. The thing that allows us to stay healthy is the fact that we've gotten on to the fact that this is a lifestyle game. It's not a once and done. Right? You weren't able to go carnivore for a period of time, resolve your gut issues, and then go back to how you were before. Because had you done that, you would have had the same issues come back probably, or worse.
Correct.
So it's a lifestyle game, and understanding how to be healthy, you have to live that lifestyle. So yeah, I love the fact that you've highlighted the pediatricians as the most important part of the chain there, because I think they are, but they're woefully misinformed, in my opinion, when it comes to nutrition and metabolic health in general, because there's more than just nutrition that informs metabolic health. And of
course,
coming to my son, we have severe struggles with my boy. He is undergoing assessment at the moment for ARFID, which is avoidance restricted food intake disorder. His sensory issues are such that his diet is maximally limited. There's one porridge that he will eat consistently. And then there's Oreos or Doritos. Those are the two junk foods that he loves. And we have to try and limit that as best we can. But the boy will not eat it. And I've got to stress.
Those are my junk foods when I was. Those were my junk foods precisely when I was a kid too. It was Oreos and chips.
Yeah. Well, I come from South Africa, and I was brought up 80s, 90s, very much the era of you eat what is put in front of you or you don't eat. And you are beaten if you don't eat, and you will then have it for breakfast the next day. Like militant discipline, take no prisoners, hardcore.
Yeah.
And it was a real education for me, this journey with my boy, because at first I came at it probably not from as harsh a point, but my initial thoughts was, well, if he doesn't want to eat, leave him. He'll eventually be hungry enough that he will eat. And it took me a little while to understand, well, no, that's not it at all. This isn't fussiness.
Yeah.
He has extreme sensory issues that he won't even put other foods near him. You can't bring it near him. It's quite wild. It's very difficult to navigate. So it's a work in progress. I was making progress with him last year. We had him on the weaning sort of purees, the sachets of puree that you get. And I was able to then batch cook some meat, so beef mince or lamb mince, and blend that up so that it's the same texture, same consistency as the puree. And I was mixing that into the sachets and starting to get his sort of nutritional content up per meal. And then he started school in September. He went into reception, which is the first year of school here. But he was put into a mainstream school rather than a special needs school. We had to fight to get him a decent placement because the one that the council wanted to put him into had actually turned around in the consultation period and said, we can't meet his needs. Like we're not equipped to deal with this. And the council still wanted to put him there because it was the closest school to us. So my wife had to tour around and basically interview other schools and eventually found one, which is about a half-hour drive from us, and got him a placement there. And they've got I forget the acronym for it. No, it's gone. They've got a room for the special needs kids, ones with what we call EHCPs, which is Education Healthcare Plan, I think is what the acronym stands for.
Yeah.
And it basically spells
we have a lot of HP healthcare plans that we use similar kind of terminology.
So it outlines what he's diagnosed with, what he needs in terms of interventions, who needs to deliver them, how often, etc. And it's the guidance to the school so that they know how to meet his needs and help him develop. Because that's always the goal. We're trying to develop these human beings to the point where they become functional, responsible adults that can live on their own and be successful in society. It's not supposed to just be a daycare to give the parents a couple hours free every day, right? So he started there in September, and his regression has been mental. It's actually frightening how much he's regressed in the 10 months that he's been at the school, to the point where we've recently had his EHCP reviewed. And we're in the process of trying to get him transferred to a dedicated special needs facility because the school themselves have admitted that they can't meet need. They've got the EHCP, they've got it all spelled out what needs doing. They've been unable to keep up with it, unable to do it. So he has to go into a special needs setting so that he gets the occupational therapy and interventions that is necessary to help him overcome the challenges that he has. So I see it a bit more nuanced than I would have a year ago. Because for a child like mine, where it's not fussiness, if he's not eating this particular thing, he literally will not eat. The boy will starve and become malnourished, but he will not eat anything else. There's no point at which hunger then takes over and overrides that sensory issue. And that was something that was difficult for me to wrap my head around. So eating anything is better than eating nothing from that perspective. Now, I'm not saying that it's like that for every autistic child. In my case, with my boy, he's level 3 autistic, which is the most severe. And he has suspected ARFID, which he's undergoing the assessment for at the moment. In his case, he literally will not eat anything except this particular porridge or those two snacky type things. And so I can't take the approach of, well, we're going to restrict that because you need to eat this good food. It is literally a case of any food is good food because he won't eat anything else. That said, that's not the case for everyone, but I've heard that from too many pediatricians, and I think that they maybe need a little bit of education on what essential nutrients are and what they're not, because they're not carbohydrates or fiber, and to start to understand that the foods that are most nutrient dense and bioavailable to us are the foods that we should prioritize, because it's about more than just calories. At the moment, I'm having to mix in vitamin sachets, and I've been very careful about where I get them to make sure that they're bioavailable forms into his porridge and smuggle them in so that I'm getting some nutrition into him, because calories are not enough. There's essential nutrients that are necessary for the body to do what it needs to do. And if you can eat all the calories in the world. If you go on an all Oreo diet, but you're eating 6,000 calories a day, you're way over consuming calories, but you're going to become malnourished because you're not getting the essential nutrients that you need.
A lot of vegetarians and vegans, even though when they have a calorie surplus, they're still deficient in B vitamins and iron. So they become anemic and have like a plethora of problems afterwards. So I'm kind of glad you brought that up. But I think that's something that should be addressed with these medical institutions. And the whole goal as part of this legislative act is to not only kind of like, promote kind of like better nutrition and lifestyle to the rest of the American public, but also to teach our future doctors properly on nutrition. Because I think you probably may have seen, or we spoke before in one of our prior podcasts, in the United States, the most prestigious medical schools, like the best medical schools, the average they spend on nutrition in their entire medical school career, which is thousands and thousands and thousands of hours, and they get like 4 to 5 years of medical school plus the residency. They only spend 19 hours. I think it's 19.6 hours on nutrition their entire medical school career. And when I spoke with Dr. Ken Berry, he said he's like, I don't even think that's accurate. I think it's actually less. He's like, we had a 1 semester course that we took for 12 weeks, 1 hour a day. So 12 hours is probably more accurate. And he spoke with all his other colleagues that went to different medical schools, and they got 12 hours too. So when you got all these doctors who spend 12 hours on nutrition in their entire medical school's career, then you have these personal trainers that spend a lot more hours on that, and they're still studying nutrition. Then it's a factual and accurate statement when your average personal trainer knows much more about nutrition than your average medical doctor. And that's an issue because people go to their medical doctors primarily for their health issues. They will go to the personal trainer last.
Well, the personal trainer is a vain indulgence, isn't it? That's the perception, that's the stigma. Yeah. But you're absolutely right. Your personal trainer.
And you know why the medical schools are spending such less time on nutrition, though, right? What are they spending most of their time on?
Well, it's pharmaceuticals.
Pharmacology.
Yeah, yeah. The
Pharmacology is the
overwhelming
biggest.
majority of their yeah, the overwhelming majority
Yeah,
of their
because
education
most
is
of their
pharmacology.
donors, almost all the major donors for all the medical schools in the entire country and probably worldwide are pharmaceutical companies. They got the most money, so they influence and say, hey, let's take a look at your curriculum. We'll give you some money, but we want to look at your curriculum and we want to see if they change it. All right. We'll give you some money, but we really see a lot more benefits with these pharmaceutical medications. I think you should educate the doctors on all the benefits and different kind of like uses for all the pharmaceutical medications. So let's put the nutrition off to the side. This is where the money's coming, and this is what you're teaching the doctors.
Yeah,
And
that is the
fortunately, it is. But fortunately, a lot of the carnivore doctors are speaking out because they know and they acknowledge. Dr. Barry, Dr. Shafee, Dr. Baker, Dr.
mm,
Kiltz, a couple others that I had podcasts with over the years, they all say the same thing. They never taught us anything about true nutrition in medical schools, and I really hope they change that. And that's going to be the goal. But the problem is, we have to restrict amount of influence these pharmaceutical companies can have, not only over our Congress and not only over mainstream media, but mainly over our future doctors, and that's going
yeah.
to kind of determine our future of our health, not only over here in the United States, but worldwide, even on your end.
Mm. Coming back to your question about your nephew, my journey with my son has taught me something that has stood out quite profoundly. It's taught me that the caregiver, so parents, teachers, carers, teachers' assistants, or all the people involved in the care of the special needs child, are the primary medium through which every intervention for that child needs to flow. And the care of that child is a marathon, it's not a sprint. So it's a marathon that, if I navigate this correctly, there's a very good chance that we can help my boy be an independent, functional, successful adult. That's the hope. That's the aim. But it's a marathon, and there's a long road before we get to that point. And being the primary medium through which all of these interventions need to flow, we need to keep up and be present and show up across the course of this marathon. And the stress of what
Correct.
we're going through and the ease with which you could say, I've had a rough day, I'm just going to eat something convenient, or I'm not going to work out today, I'm not going to get outside and get some light exposure. I'm going to sacrifice myself because there's something I need to do for my boy. It's so easy to do it. It's like that. It almost, there's a stigma around it. And I hope that some of the audience watching, I hope that this hits home, because
Yeah.
looking after yourself as a special needs parent is seen as a bit of a vain indulgence. And I want to be very, very clear that it's not. It's the first step in looking after the child that you care for. Because if you don't keep yourself standing, you're eventually going to be unable to care for the child. And then what? And as we said a little bit earlier, this is a bit like a pension, right? You sacrifice a little bit here and now, paying into this thing, investments into metabolic health over time. And over time, that compounds and you enjoy better health outcomes. It's not the case, and it's exactly the same as a pension. If you took 100 grand today and you started investing that in little bits over the next 20 years, what you end up with will be substantially more than if you did nothing for the next 20 years and then try to put 100 grand in at the end. That compound interest is the thing that makes or breaks it. Metabolic health is exactly the
Correct.
same. The earlier you start working on your metabolic health, the better your health span is going to be further into your lifespan. It's not the case that my boy is 5 now. Let's say if we had a crystal ball, we could say, oh, at 18, he'll be fine. It's not the case that I can neglect myself for the next 13 years and then start looking after my health, because by then I'm in my late 50s and I've got no hope then. I will have all sorts of
Yeah,
medical
and
issues.
that's why I kind of
I
make
will
it
be
clear
struggling.
that some Yeah, some of my former teammates from wrestling. We'll make this the last couple. We'll probably got 5 more minutes before I jet out, but
Yeah.
I'm going to make a couple last statements. Is that before I became like a fitness enthusiast, I was a wrestler. So we all have our athletic backgrounds. I was a wrestler, and a lot of my teammates have gained. It's kind of funny because wrestling, you're cutting weight. You have to make a certain weight class, right, every week. So every week we'd kind of go out and indulge. We go to a buffet. Like, oh, I got to make weight the next week. We're cutting weight. But after wrestling, I think I'm one of the only of one of my teammates that actually stayed in shape. Most of my teammates, I think even our one like 25 pounder like is now like he got up to 300 at one point. I'm like, I was like, how'd you get like, yeah, exactly. But but he's making the change, and probably the most
Nice.
important thing is that he had a wake up call. He's like, I have two young kids.
Mm,
I want to be alive to see my kids grow up. And I can't take care of them if I'm sick. So he started changing,
exactly.
and he lost like 65 pounds. And
Nice.
he's like, he's following me on it. He's like, hey, I've been trying to do, I'm not completely carnivore, but I'm mainly just cutting out a lot of the carbohydrates and I'm eating real food. I'm eating
Nice.
kind of like packaged like that. I was like, that's the simplest step. So that's going to be like one of my main points is that for a lot of the parents who are struggling, especially if you want to take care of your kids, you take care of yourself while you're taking care of your kids, and
Yeah.
that will allow you to watch them grow up.
Yeah. It's definitely not an either or scenario, and it's the wrong way to think about it. You have to look after yourself as the foundation for enabling you to look after them. And obviously, you have to look after them still also. So, yeah, I like it. I like it.
Yeah.
Well,
And I got to do the
Chris,
same thing during my campaign. I got to look out for myself, my health, and I
yeah,
got to look out for everybody else. So
absolutely. I enjoy watching all your reels, your one-handed handstands and good stuff. It's
I'm tired,
motivational.
but I'm going to keep pushing. It's okay. I can do it.
Nice, nice. Well, Chris, as we end off, what would be your main takeaway point that you want to leave viewers with?
It's kind of probably going back to my main mission of my new slogan that I'm adding in as part of my original slogan is that, yes, I think a lot more people should focus on prevention over prescription or prevention before prescription, however you want to say
Mm,
it, because I think we're going to see a lot more healthier children and adults if we if we start early. Don't wait
yeah,
until the last minute. And that is what I'm going to be focusing on here. And that's why I'm actually working with a lot of the younger youth to get them healthier as early as possible. The Boy Scouts, you've seen that. I'm working with the kids from the high schools. I'm keeping up with them. I'm showing like, hey, as
nice,
a 40, I turned 41 next week, actually. I was like, hey, I'm gonna keep up with you, and if I can keep up with you, I want you doing this every week. So that's gonna be the main focus. But I want to make sure that other states follow, and that's the whole goal: is we make the change, we make Nevada healthy again. Every other, all the remaining 49 states in the United States will follow, and internationally,
nice.
the
Yeah,
UK will follow.
nice. As always, brother, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining us,
Pleasure, buddy.
and all the best
Always. All right.
with the upcoming elections and stuff, man. I hope it goes well. I'll be following
Yes,
closely.
and we'll be in touch throughout the campaign progress.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching the episode. I hope that you found the conversation meaningful and informative, and I hope that it has empowered you with some tools and insights that you can take to tweak and improve your own lifestyle approach in pursuit of optimal metabolic health outcomes. If you've enjoyed the episode, and if you're enjoying the podcast, I'd like you to do me the kindness of please subscribing to the channel, giving it a like, maybe even giving it a share. Help to raise awareness and get the podcast in front of as many viewers as possible, because it is my passion to try and help as many people as possible to understand more of the nuance around metabolic health and how to tweak their lifestyle in pursuit of optimal outcomes. Also, if you have any constructive feedback, things that you think I could improve on, any critiques, any criticisms, please do feed them back. I give you my solemn word that I will take them seriously, and I will, to the best of my ability, work to improve and to give you a more refined and more targeted product as a result of your feedback. So I will take it seriously, and I'll do what I can to improve the show. But again, thank you very much for watching. Keep thriving.